To welcome everyone. I am Hatice, the president of the club. Today we are here to have a Q&A session with David Peterson. He's a linguist and he does many conlangs, and it's really impressive actually. I was, in his Wikipedia page and it goes on and on and on and on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? And also, I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. Göksu and Pelin will be our moderators today. Say hi, guys.
Hello, I'm Göksu.
Hello.
And Pelin. Okay. By the way, so you just want me to go straight to Q&A, not to presentation?
If you have a presentation, we would love to start with that. Yeah.
You sure? Okay. I just have to share the screen.
All right. Can you do it, or should I give you access?
It says I'm not allowed, so I need access.
Okay. I gave you the access.
Yeah. No. Hold on a sec. There we go. Now everybody can. Okay, so then. Yes, allow. I've never done this on. I've never done this on Google Meet.
I think it's. I think the presentation should already be on your computer, and then you should.
Well, can you see? Does it still look like me, or do you see something that says the art of language invention?
We see you.
Yeah, so it's not working.
Oh no. Okay, so
it keeps asking me if I want to share, and it's like, yes, I do.
Let me try something, and then maybe I can guide you.
Show pop-up window block. Always allow on Google Meet. There we go. That's different.
Can you guys see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Maybe you should be a co-host. Maybe that's the problem. But I allowed you to do it, so.
If it's okay for you, you can send it via email, and we can just share it. So that.
No,
yeah.
That won't work. None of the fonts will come through. Microphone reactions. Okay. Share this window. There we go. So now everybody should be able to see. Is that right?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, and look at that. I appear like a little circle in the corner. That's weird. Oh my gosh, I come out of the circle. How far?
That's cool, actually.
Okay. I've never done this. I've only done it with Zoom. All right. Anyway, I do want to give plenty of time for Q&A, so I'll kind of zoom through, but I'm hoping that this will answer a lot of the basic questions and just give you an idea of what it is I do. So first, what in English, conlang is a constructed language. I have no idea what term is used in Turkish. Maybe somebody could tell me?
It's yapay dil,
Yeah.
constructed
Artificial
language.
Artificial, translated literally.
It's PyDiff, did you say?
Artificial
Yapay
language.
dil.
Yeah.
Say the word again, though.
Yapay. Let me just write it in the chat.
All right, I'll look at it later. But I wanted to give you a brief history of language creation. So the first intentionally created language we know about comes from the 12th century. This is Hildegard von Bingen, and she created a list of mostly nouns to discuss every topic that she could think of, from the real world to religious aspects. And she used her language in music. Later, there was an entire segment of, now, by the way, a later development, I want to say it was the 14th century, was Bala-i-Balan, which was another religious language developed near Turkey. I'm not sure exactly where, but a very ancient one. Next, there were philosophical languages that tried to create languages where the word itself would tell you exactly what it meant. So that the first sound would tell you what kind of matter it was. The second, it'd be kind of like where you say with animals, this is its family, genus, species, and so on, all scrunched together into one word. And the most famous example of that is John Wilkins' language. This was around the 17th century. In the 19th century, that was the advent of international auxiliary languages, and languages that were specifically created to be simpler to learn and to use, and somewhat international in order to promote international peace and via international communication. The most famous of these is Esperanto, but there were tons of others in the 19th century, and people are still creating them to this day. Then in the 20th century, J.R. Tolkien, as far as we know, was the first person, at least to document creating a language for fun. So in other words, not for philosophy, not for or science, not for religion, not for international communication, but for no other reason than he liked creating languages. And this kind of, the publication of his book, The Lord of the Rings, was kind of a watershed moment for many language creators all over the world, since they were published with appendices of his languages, because they saw that, hey, this guy is just creating languages for fun, so I can too. And that led to kind of the next bit. So Mark Okrand wasn't the first, but starting in like the 1970s, people started hiring, usually linguists, to create languages for television shows. Mark Okrand created Klingon for Star Trek 3, and then went on to create a couple of others in the Star Trek universe. And so soon there was kind of like another avenue of language creation that others hadn't thought of before. Finally, in the late 20th century, and continuing to this day, when the internet came home, that was when other language creators who weren't famous found each other. And these language creators basically just enjoyed creating their own languages and enjoyed learning from each other. This is a meeting of the first language creation conference held at Berkeley in 2007. And I'm up there in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Anyway, so what does a conlanger do? A conlanger is someone who creates languages. Anyone who creates a language has created a language or has attempted to create a language is a conlanger. It's not like there's a test you have to do or anything like that. If you are interested in creating languages and give it a shot, then you're in the club, essentially. Languages can be created for all different purposes and via all different means. So I've got 4 examples here. In the upper right, you might recognize Esperanto, a language created for international communication. And it's a spoken language that uses an alphabet. And that's something that you can do. In the upper left, this is a language created by, oh my goodness, Trent Pearson. And it looks like a picture, but it is actually a language. It says something. I don't quite know how, but Trent actually created this for a book that I wrote called The Art of Language Invention. And somehow embedded in that picture is an actual language. In the lower left, that is a sign language I created because you don't have to create spoken languages, you can create sign languages. And then in the lower right, that's a language that my wife Jessie and I created for a show called Vampire Academy. And so that's basically, it's like there's really any number of reasons to create languages and via any number of means. As you know, a language creator, you create or decide on the transmission system, whether it's going to be spoken, whether it's going to be signed, whether it's going to be written only, whether it's going to be done with food or with smell. You create the grammar, you create the lexicon, and then just basically whatever else extra happens to fit in with it. So how I started was, this is me as a freshman at UC Berkeley. And this picture was taken in 1999. I came in as a literature major, thinking that I would finish as a literature major, but I had a lot of free units, and so I took other language courses. The first I took was Arabic, and I absolutely fell in love with Arabic. I took it for a year, and I had never imagined that a language could work like this. I took it because of the writing system, which I found beautiful. I also liked the sound of it, but it was the grammar that really blew me away. By the way, this was always one of my favorite words, purely based on the sound. Dijaj, at least in the Levantine pronunciation. Of course, it means chicken, but you know, that will happen with language. There's the sound of it, and there's the meaning, and sometimes the two don't match up. After that, I took Russian. And actually at the same time, well, no, wait, that's right. I took Russian then. By the way, I stopped taking Arabic after 2 semesters because the next course was going to be offered at 9 in the morning, which was too early for me. I stopped taking Russian after 1 semester because the next course was being offered at 8 in the morning. I also had the opportunity to take Turkish at Berkeley, but it was also offered at 9 in the morning. This is a recurring theme with me. If things happen in the morning, I just don't do them. My course in Middle Egyptian, though, was in the afternoon, and so I took that. And so I actually learned Egyptian hieroglyphs while I was at Berkeley. This is a word where the first symbol stands for a sequence of 2 consonants, yeah. The second symbol is a reed, and it stands for ya, and it's not an additional ya, it's just to remind you how the first thing is pronounced. The quail chick, the third one, is an oo. And then the last one is a cat, because this word is myo and it means cat. And so I always loved Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs. I also took French while I was at Berkeley, and this is just a picture of my cat because I love her. And then I also took Esperanto. Esperanto was the created language that I mentioned before, created by Zamenhof. This is the first time I'd ever heard of somebody creating a language. I never imagined that a human being could create a language until I took Esperanto. And then after that, I took a course in linguistics where, you know, I mean, you're all linguistic students, you know. It took me 1 day before I realized I should be majoring in this. And so I started majoring in linguistics in addition to literature. Anyway, it was kind of a combination of linguistics and Esperanto that got me to language creation. Esperanto first was, I learned that people could create languages. And with linguistics, I saw so many different language phenomena that I became fascinated and thought, what if I created a language that had just the cool stuff in it that I liked? And that was where I started. So that was 2000. That was 24 years ago. Anyway. Skipping ahead, I guess, 9 years. So I basically worked as a, you know, I just created languages on my own and meeting with the community for about 9 years till I got the opportunity to work on Game of Thrones. It was a contest, and a contest that I won. It was announced to language creators everywhere. There were about 40 or so people who applied. So that was 2009. I went on to work on a bunch of other stuff. This stops around, I don't know, 2017 or 2016 or something. Since 2019, I've been working on stuff with my wife, Jessie. The latest thing is the Dune movie is coming out in a few days, and we worked on that. Anyway, so when you work as a conlanger, I wanted to show you a bit what that was like. You know, first you're creating the sounds and the grammar of the language as well as the orthography. For sounds, I wanted to kind of show you what the very beginning process is like. So we create what's called a sound sample, where we're meeting with a production team. We get an idea for what the language is. We have an idea for what it might sound like. And so we give them a file that has like a sentence, but it's all gibberish. It doesn't mean anything, but it has the approximate sound that we intend for it to have. We send it to them and say, does this sound about right? So this was a show called Motherland Fort Salem that Jessie and I worked on. And we sent them 2 sound samples, actually. And you can see they're a little bit different. But again, neither of these things mean anything. I'm going to play this, and I'm going to hope that you can hear it. So we'll stop. And if you can't, you let me know. Okay, did you hear that?
No, we couldn't hear it.
Oh, no. All right, then I think I'm going to have to skip over some stuff. But that's fine. We can just spend the rest of the time with Q&A. Like, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe if I because it played in my earphones, I think I would have to like take them out and put them back in. Let me try something real quick.
All right.
Oh my God.
What happened?
Okay, now you can hear me again.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, did you end up hearing that sound sample?
No, I'm sorry. We couldn't hear
Okay.
anything.
Then you know what? We're just gonna skip it. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, you should reshare it.
Okay. Right. Oh no.
Someone says maybe he can share it as a file for us to access, but I guess that's not.
They're embedded now, but okay, now it's doing the thing where I can't share my screen again. Oh no. Select Safari settings for this website to update permissions, then refresh the page. How did I do it before? Like seriously, it worked before. Okay, that's good.
Someone says that while sharing screen, there's an option to also allow audio to be transferred. So you should tick that option box maybe while sharing. You can try that maybe, but if it's not really working.
I think that needs to be a Chrome page for it to work.
That's true. Yeah, right now I'm on Safari. But the thing is, it worked. Like you all saw the presentation, yeah?
Yeah, it worked last time.
Yeah, so I did get it to work. There's just some magic combination of things that I needed to share this window. Yeah. I need to just ignore it. Okay. Yes, continue to share. All right. So what I'm going to do is there are going to be a couple of parts with audio, but not very much. So I'm just going to skip them. But essentially, there were two different sound samples that we sent. One of these was approved. And once they're approved, that was when we just start working on the rest of the language. So when it comes to producing a phonology, it needs to be pronounceable by human actors. And then, of course, humans have a certain number of sounds, but also unique. And the thing is, where we were kind of at our wits' end. So that's the type of thing that happens. But something that is a key thing for language creators to take away is that the phototactics of the language are the most noticeable features, not the actual sound inventory. So I give these two examples of two different languages we created where the sound systems are almost identical. So everything that's in white is identical between these two languages. One of them has ev and the pink ones, and then the other one has the green one and doesn't have the pink ones, and vice versa. So they have pretty much the same sound system, but the languages sound super, super, super different. Vowels are almost the same. I was going to play you an example of how they sound different, but we're going to kind of skip right through that. What I can do is I can find these sound files and I can just I'll email them to FA, and then he can share them so that at least you can hear them later. All right, so now we're going to jump over to grammar.
Great.
Yeah. Sorry, so morphology, syntax, you know approximately what morphology is. Word changes to reflect grammatical distinctions. All right, so in Turkish, this fellow is Yedi, yeah?
Yeah.
And if there's two of them,
Kediler.
Kediler, yeah?
Yeah.
How about 3?
Again, kediler.
And if there's a whole bunch of them?
Kediler.
All right. So that is how Turkish does it. It's also how English does it. But languages, of course, can do different things. So here, for example, are 4 different languages. And at the top, you can see different amounts of cats. The amount of cats getting progressively better, of course, because more cats is always better. And different languages will express these numbers in different ways. The top language is a language called Trigedasleng, and there's just one word for cat, sosnepa, and it doesn't matter how many there are. This is actually what Pokemon is like. So, for example, if there's 1 Pikachu, there's 1 Pikachu. If there's 2, there's 2 Pikachu, 3 Pikachu, and so on. Ajnamari, another language we created, is like English and Turkish. So, Muj is 1 cat. Mujaj is 2 or more. But then a third language, this is the language that Jesse and I created for mice on our show, Langtime Studio, our YouTube series, Langtime Studio. It has a word for 1 cat, wak-i. It has a word for 3 or more cats, wak-ibu. And then it has a word for exactly 2 cats, wak-iswa. Sorry, wak-iswa. I want to get the tone right. So that's the dual number. Arabic is like this, that has a special number that just means exactly 2 of something, and then exactly 1 of something, and then 3 or more of something. But you can do even different things than that. The bottom language, which my little circle may be covering up, is HV. It's High Valyrian. And in High Valyrian, we have Keli, which is 1 cat. And then you have Kelin, which is like 2 or 3 cats. It doesn't matter. It's just like a small number, like 2 to 4, depending on how many there are. Kelin is that. Kela is, in general, a bunch of cats. But Kelir is all the cats. So like as kind of like a unit, a little army of cats is Kelir. And so those are 4 different ways to just carve up numbers. And there are ways that are even different from this. There are some languages that have a special number for exactly 3 of something, for example, but usually not beyond that. It's usually 1, 2, and 3, and then that's it. And then there are even different ways to carve it up. Also, I wanted to show you these languages all happen to use suffixes to show differences in number. And for the most part, they show suffixes on non-singular numbers, but you can do other things. So this is just a list of words for leaf and leaves, singular and plural. First one is ajnamari, so we have bon and bonage. So again, it's a suffix. The second language is a language for opossums that Jesse and I created. And you have stach and zestach. And so it's a prefix rather than a suffix. And that's, of course, on the plural. The last language on the screen is Nola, created for a show called The Shannara Chronicles. And you can see it's a suffix, but it's a suffix on the singular. So felsa is a bunch of leaves. Felsach is exactly 1 leaf. You can also have a suffix for both. So the top is a Raytheant from Defiance, and we have divumma and divummi, where there's a unique suffix for each one for singular and plural. You can also have a kind of internal change. So puri is chakobsa for leaf, and kauri is leaves. So there's kind of an internal change. And then even weirder stuff can happen. This bottom one is a language called Sondiv that I created for a show called Starcrossed. And 1 leaf is novod, and the plural is ndul. And I can barely explain what's happening there. Anyway, so when you're creating grammar, of course, you're creating nominal inflection if it exists, verbal inflection if it exists, and also the other parts of speech and their types of inflection. Syntax is the ordering of words and phrases and clauses. So, for example, this is how the order of words is in English, with a verb in the middle. I'm sure you know this from elementary linguistics, so Jem wrote books. The canonical order for Turkish is, on the other hand, SOV, Cem Books wrote, right? And then the next most common is VSO. So this would be like Hawaiian or Irish or older Arabic. So wrote Cem Books. And these are the three most common word orders. SOV, like Turkish, is the most common. And it's got like 40, I think it's like 41%. And SVO is like 40%. And then VSO is like 8%. And then the other three logical orders, very, very, very small. Barely any languages have this. Most languages have these three. Trigedasleng, SVO, so just an example. This is, let's see, and I take you through and I accept your challenge. So we have there, I is I, take, this is language, by the way, is derived from English. I take and you throw it on. Tsash, a language we created for Elemental, the Pixar movie, has SOV. So this one is, let's see if I can get this. At shash. Who is stopping us? So at is who and shash is us and pfuch is stop. And then Jacob says VSO. This was the one from Dune. So Jarbaha Fremin Nuksho. The Fremen summoned a sandworm, or summoned the Fremen a sandworm. So it's just a quick rundown of syntax. Then there's more complex syntax as you get into how relative clauses work, how subordinate clauses work, how coordination works, how pragmatics work, and negation. Anyway, for orthography, this is the part that I enjoy the most. I love creating writing systems. And so, of course, an alphabet is not the same thing as a writing system. There are many different types of writing systems. The Roman alphabet is an alphabet. Arabic uses an abjad. Devanagari uses an abugida. Japanese has two different syllabaries. And then Chinese exclusively uses a logography. And I wanted to show you an example of each and how they differ using one word to transcribe. So for example, I thought I would choose Istanbul, but that of course is not correct exactly. It should be that, Istanbul. So in an alphabet, this thing works pretty much like you would expect. There's one symbol for every single consonant and vowel. And so it lines up pretty much like that. And there are no surprises. An abjad is different. The consonants are given primary importance and the vowels are not treated as necessarily important. In this case, there's a letter for a vowel beginning a word. Other than that, you just write the consonants. And so actually what's being written here is something like this. And so the bottom is what it actually reads like, and the vowels are assumed. And abugida, on the other hand, allows you to write single consonants, but also has modifications for a following vowel. So we have a letter to start it, but you see that there's one symbol for ta, one symbol for bu. And in fact, in this particular language, this is for Vampire Academy, a word can't end in L, so you got to throw a vowel on the end there. And in fact, the N there is just nasalization. So it's this would be kind of pronounced Istanbulu. That's a fun one. A syllabary takes whatever is given and said it has to be a full syllable. So there has to be at least a vowel and optionally a consonant to the left. This is a syllabary that Jesse and I created for our mouse language from Langtime Studio. And so things line up like this, but what it actually says is Isi Tana Bulu. And it kind of has to, because there's no way to represent a single consonant sound. And in fact, it becomes longer. A logography, this is where things can get a little funny. So this is High Valyrian's writing system that I created for House of the Dragon. And I really put a lot of thought into how I could spell this, because I didn't have a very good idea. Essentially, these glyphs, none of them stand for the sound of this at all. It's just kind of like you see this and would recognize that it stands for the name of the city. And the idea I had was we have, these are three words, ri, silie, and arachi, and they have different functions here. Essentially, it's like the first word is a word that means through or to pass through. And the second word, it doesn't mean gate. I couldn't find a good emoji for this, but it kind of looks like the Bosphorus Strait. And so the idea was, and then on the end, that's just an ending that tells you that it's a foreign word. It's not a native word. And so the idea was like, it's kind of like the place where you stop when you go through the Bosphorus Strait. That was my idea for how to spell it in High Valyrian, since you can't really do anything with the sound of it. When it comes to actually working on a show, there are kind of three levels of representation. This first one, like the orthography, this is something that I would only share with the art department. So like the art department gets this in order to put up signs and to make sure it kind of looks right. The actors get a simplified version of whatever is being said. So in other words, they don't have to learn any spelling. They don't have to remember any irregularities. They just get the simplest way possible so that they can pronounce it more or less accurately. And then, of course, for us, we work with the actual IPA when we record. All right, so working on a production. I wanted to share this. I don't know if I can, you know what? I'm going to share this without sound, and I think it's going to work. Like, you're not going to be able to hear it. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, so I wanted to show you what it's like working on a production. So for Game of Thrones, there was this, in the third season, there was the storyline where Daenerys purchases an entire slave army from this guy for one of her dragons. So there's the army, the Valgeris, the Unsullied. Whoops. And she sells it to him for a dragon, and then she frees the army and asks them to follow her, which they do. And then there's this big battle. There's a scene in the 5th episode which occurs after that battle is all done, where she asks the Unsullied if they've chosen a leader. And I wanted to show that scene to illustrate what working on a show is like. We're going to skip the first one because you're not going to be able to really see anything from it. But a second one, I'm going to show you that. So what would happen is, you know, I would get the scripts. They would ask me to translate certain lines, and so I would translate them. This was one of them. The line was, "You will select your own leader from amongst your own ranks," and I translate it, send it back. I record it on MP3. I tell them approximately what it means down there. And so there's this line, "Genti jevi gemele idere biletas." And that means you will select, because this is what I was asked to translate. You will select your own leader from amongst your own ranks. But they changed the line to "have you selected a leader from amongst your own ranks?" And they did that without asking me to retranslate it. So technically what's said on screen doesn't match the subtitles, because what that should have been is "have you selected your own leader" should have been "Genti jevi gemele idereptat," not idirebelitas. Anyway, then sometimes things like this would happen. I wanted to show you this email I received. Somebody who was on the production named Allison Hooper asked if I could translate something for Danny, saying "remove your helmet." That was, and you can see that was at 3:24 p.m. on February 8th. And she said that just a few minutes later, and they said that it would be okay if I sent it to them by Monday. But I actually sent it back to them a few minutes later saying, "Here is the line, remove your helmet." I made a couple mistakes there, but that doesn't matter. And she emailed back saying, again, all the same day, all within like 20 minutes and says, "You're great, thank you." So they asked for the line to be recorded. I sent them the line, and this is the line, "Ao hegelti nadinas." But this is what Amelia Clark actually says. She says, "Derepti." And this is why. When they were recording it, they threw in this line. This is after they were done filming the scene. They just had the back of her head. I guess they must have decided there wasn't enough time to say "Ao hegelti nadinas," and so they just took part of another line of hers and just threw it in there for her to say. So then something else that happens in this scene is we're introduced to the character Grey Worm, who has a very, very, very long speech. And he happens to pronounce it really, really well. So I know you're not going to be able to hear this, but what I've done is I'm showing you the scene and I put up what they're saying. And if it's in green, it means it's pronounced very well. If it's in yellow, it's not pronounced very well, but it's close. If it's red, it's totally, totally wrong. So you won't be able to hear it, but at least you'll be able to get a sense of basically, are the actors doing a good job pronouncing what they're actually supposed to be pronouncing? So we'll give it a shot.
Can I just cut you for a minute?
Yes, of course.
The meeting will end in a few minutes, and then we can just rejoin from the same link. But if it doesn't work, we will send you a new link. But it should work. Okay.
All right. We'll give this a shot. Okay.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So you can see the yellow means that she makes like a slight error in pronunciation, but it's fine. There, of course, it just wasn't even close. She says "dereti." That was way off. Said "millier" there. Then this guy comes on. So good. Look at that guy. He's incredible. Absolutely amazing. Flawless. And that was his first line. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I do. So yeah. So hopefully it gives you a sense. And then I was just saying thank you. And then this Linktree QR code. So what we can do.
Olmuyor. Yeni link atıyorum. Tamam. Alırım, atarım. Bir dakika, nerede? Hocalara atıyorum. Okay.
Tekrardan hoş geldiniz.
Hello, welcome here.
Hi there.
Hi, we saw the QR code, but we didn't
Hi,
have it
welcome
here.
again.
So
That's cool. It kind of ended at like, you know, a pretty good time, but here I can I'll put that on just for a second, but then we can just go to Q&A.
All right.
Here. Ooh, what the heck happened there?
Hatice, did you give the co-host to the...
Yeah, I should have done that. Yeah, they can share their screen.
Okay. So I'll just put that up, and then once once everybody is mostly back, then we can just go to Q&A, and you can let me know. I can always
All right.
share this link too. It's not a big deal. It's just links to, if you want to find me on the internet, it's not a big deal.
I think we can start slowly because people slowed down.
Sure. All right.
All right. I'm enabling the chat. We can take the questions from chat or WhatsApp group. Anyway,
Yeah, whatever.
you guys. Göksu, I'm leaving the posting to you now.
Okay, I will check if there are any questions. And also, I was also wondering for the sign languages.
Mhm.
So, do you like restrict some things? For example, in sign languages, they usually use the space and like hands and like, you know, face. But like, do you add some things to it? For example, just using face or like, I don't know many sign languages. That's why I really got curious about the Conlang sign language of yours.
You could do anything that you wanted, but if your users are human, there's a reason that sign languages use the space that they do. It's because it's just the lowest common denominator. That is, it's, you know, we tend to, human beings tend to, when you look at somebody, you tend to focus on this area more than any other area. We also tend to stand upright. And so it just kind of makes sense that that's where a sign language is going to happen. You need to create really different beings to have a different style sign language. And I have a good example that I can share with you. I'm just going to find the website. All right. I'm going to share a link to this here. So if you go take a look at this website, this guy created these really kind of goofy looking aliens with tentacles. And they use a very different style of sign language because they have 7 tentacles that they use to make signs. So that'll just give you an idea. But yeah, it depends who's using it. You absolutely can. It's just a matter of practicality. For example, often, sometimes, especially newer conlangers will ask, well, why can't you have a language that's simultaneously signed and spoken? And the answer is you can, but nobody will use it. Like eventually, it just becomes impractical. You just do what's easiest, and what's easiest is not doing 2 things at once.
Thank you for the answer. And now we can start with the chat.
Sure.
Mariam asks, I want to know if you recommend a career as a conlanger. How much time do you have to devote for this, and does it provide a good life?
At the moment, no, I'll say that there's not a lot of room because of all of the television shows and movies that are made, right? A very small percentage will possibly have a created language in it, or could. Most movies are just realistic movies set in the modern day, and so they just don't have any need for a language creator. Of the small percentage that could have a created language, only a few of those will actually hire somebody to create a language. And even of those that get hired, a smaller percentage are actually language creators. Often they'll just they'll hire a linguist instead of a language creator, or they'll hire just a random person on set to do it, or they will just do complete gibberish. A lot of times there are these people called dialect or accent coaches, which they don't really do anything, but they will often get jobs to create languages just because they don't really know anything about it. So for that reason, there's not a lot of opportunity at the moment for language creators to make enough money to actually support themselves. Because really television and film is the only place where a language creator can make that kind of money. Theoretically, language creators could be employed all the time to create languages for books, but authors don't seem to be as interested, and they certainly don't have as much money. Often the authors I see who create fantasy or sci-fi books, they'll try to create something on their own, and it's usually not very good. And they would balk at the idea of hiring somebody else to do any work, which is disappointing because whatever work they do is usually not very good. Anyway, so it's something where, like, if maybe in the future, and hopefully in the future, but right now it's kind of difficult to expect that you could get to a point where language creation could support you full time.
Thank you for the answer. And the next question is, they are asking, I was curious if you choose a specific language to get aspirations for the conlangs you create. For example, which language inspired you for a production like Dune?
None.
Great.
That's just, no. In the old days, I used to do that, but it's once you've been creating languages for a while, you just create the language how you want, and then go from there.
I see. Thank you for the answer. And the next question is, being a conlanger change your perspective of human languages and our capacity to use them, or cognition, etc. They're asking if it like changed the cognition.
Yeah. Kind of, but it's hard because there are also things that I learned both in linguistics and then after linguistics on my own that also shaped my perspective very strongly, and that also shaped my conlanging. Well, let me put it this way. The most influential book that I have read about that helped me both with language creation and then also just understanding language was a book called The Evolution of Grammar by Joan Bybee, William Paluca, and Revere Perkins. And this book talks about grammaticalization. Specifically, it's focused on verbal grammaticalization, but it shows how almost every single element of grammar comes from a lexical source. And so there's no just such thing as like just a regular suffix that, you know, you just created and it just means that. And basically it's like, as a conlanger, this helped to break me out of the idea that maybe you've heard of the morpheme as a theoretical unit. It's a really, really bad theory. And conlangers who are kind of shackled by the idea of the morpheme produce really, really bad work. So that was one thing that helped me kind of get beyond that, was learning about grammaticalization from Joan Bybee. So that's one thing I recommend.
Okay, thank you. Sardar asks, I have two main questions since I follow your work strictly for 3 years at least. Question 1, how do you create a computer-coded font for your unique orthography? It gets too frustrating for me. How do you keep track of the languages you construct? It must be hard to deal with all the data. At least it was pretty hard to keep it in mind when I wrote my BA thesis.
Yeah, let me, going to share a couple of things here. Let's see, what are the... Yeah, actually, this is a good one. Okay, so so bear with me. I think I understand how to share now. Okay. So hopefully you can see this document, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And here, just to help, I'm gonna turn off spell check. Can you still see it, or did it disappear?
We can still
see it.
Okay, why didn't the spell check turn off? Oh, I did the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. Now I've turned off spell check because it's very frustrating if you're a conlanger. Everything looks like it's spelled wrong. But this is the High Valyrian language. And so just to give you an idea, I write it up like a full reference grammar because this is what I enjoy, and it's what I expect to see when I open up a language. And I find it very helpful. So this is this first part. This is just all of the grammar, and then these are historical sound changes, and then this is tables and tables and tables of irregular verbs. So I'm going to skip those. Okay, and then these are just like tables that you would see in a grammar. So these are the pronouns, pronouns in the various cases. These are noun case evolutions, and so like you know, you can just see here's the name Ilex and how it declines in singular, plural, palcal, collective, and the different cases and so on. Skip those. There's some derivation, and then these are actual verb conjugations, adjectival conjugations, numbers. Little guide for how to read the dictionary, tells you what each little part of each thing means. This is where I keep track of how many words there are. And then these are hyperlinks, by the way, so I can jump to A and so on. And then this is the entire lexicon. And so you can see this is pages for the Mac, but it's the equivalent of like a Word document. And just this is how I keep track of it. these, by the way, goes back here. We can jump to the English side. I always put things in the English side, which is useful because sometimes this is much simpler. You can see it's just a one-to-one. The bigger definitions are up there. All of this is done by hand. There's probably a faster way to do it if I were a coder, but I'm not. So all of this is just done by hand and built up over the years. For High Valyrian, in addition, there's also a glyph dictionary because the way that the font works is you just type in a hashtag and then a word and a hashtag and it gives you a glyph. I found that's the best way to program a logography font so that it doesn't get, you know, ridiculous and you have to remember a bunch of codes and everything. And so this tells you everything that you can type and what word it will give you, what the name of the character is, and then some words that it's used in. And so then those are presented in alphabetical order. And then finally, the last little bit, because this is also very helpful if you're creating a logography, is the actual glyph list kind of in shape order. And so, and this part, by the way, is very, very difficult. So I don't know if I've gotten it right, and sometimes I change it. But you can see more or less, it's kind of like this is like a dot, you know, everything just has dots. Then it's a single line, and then it's like, all right, double, it has a thing in the middle, but this one obviously comes after that because there are more dots. Now it's a line. Now it's a line with things coming off of it. Then it's like crosses going through and so on. This is where the bell shapes come in, the circles, and then it goes to triangles. Eventually we're going to get to the like house shapes. There they are. Anyway, so all of that is just done by hand. And that is the way I keep track of things. It's not necessarily efficient, but that's just how I do it. It's how it makes sense to me. So there's that. Now I want to show you for a font. So I'm going to close that. Okay, I'm going to go back to, and this, I don't know if this is necessary.
Can I ask if you published that book or?
No, because technically, so this is where the weird legalities of things get in. You know, the studio, HBO, they believe that they own the Valyrian language, but I mean, truthfully, it doesn't mean anything to say you own a language because a language isn't a thing. You know, it's not like, can you imagine if somebody said like, okay, I just purchased the Spanish language and now everybody who speaks Spanish everywhere on the planet, oh, you owe me money, you owe me money. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. However, the document itself, even virtual documents, those are real things and that they own. So no, I can't just like share that. Like I'm showing it to you, but I can't like give it to people because technically they do own that virtual document. Anyway,
That's a bummer. It was such a full document.
Yeah, I've got like a template like that I kind of use, and so like you can just at least get the sense of it. But here, hold on a sec. I really want to share a screen and not just a window, and you're gonna see why. Can you see? Okay, good. All right, you can see this, right?
Yes,
we can see it.
Perfect. Okay, hold on. I need to shrink this, I think. There we go. And now I'll just resize it. So this is a font program called FontLab Studio, FontLab 8, actually. This is how I make writing systems, okay? And what happens here is that up here are just the characters. This actually isn't the interesting part. This is the interesting part. So there's two parts to it. One is how do you do the glyphs themselves? And honestly, it's a lot of math. It's a lot of trying things out and just kind of like making it work. Like it's a good one to show. This one is a very busy glyph. So, oh, and this one is actually after I put like a little effect on it. to kind of give it a look. So that actually was just done up here. There was an effect called, not contour, distort, and it just like makes things wacky. But for the actual shapes themselves, let's see if I can, that's saying all rest bold. How about, here, I'm going to open this one. This is where you can see the actual glyphs. Wait. Thank you. Here's where you can see the actual glyphs before I did that. All right. So this, yeah, this I just designed. And the way you do it, you can see these nodes here. All right. And these nodes, you know, you do that, shrink them, right? And you just kind of like, so you can see like what I've done here. This is really, really flat, but that doesn't like suit this style. And so that's why, you know, you have it bend a little bit. And for something like this, which is very brush style, it's kind of like a little uneven. So you have to work at it. So you can see how there's kind of like a little dip here and then kind of a broken line. It means that I had to add an extra node right there to pull the line down a little bit. And there are different types of nodes. So these are ones where it's like, you know, it drags the whole line no matter what. But there are other ones like this one right here that's a square. I'll zoom in on that. This one, you can actually drag them in different directions. See? And so, yeah, just like bit by bit, you just keep going with it. And the nice thing is that anytime you're creating a writing system, there's always shapes that you can copy from one to the other. So you can see like this glyph right here. We have this kind of shape right here. The next one uses that same shape. It's a different letter, but it uses the same shape. So you can just copy and paste. Same thing with like these little strokes on the left and right, copy and paste, the line, copy and paste. All of it is just kind of copy and pasting and just gradually getting it right until the character looks the way you want it to. And there's a ton of math involved. In fact, if I can open, where's Valyrian? There we go. Valyrian, it's much easier to see because it's not brush stroke. It's much more angular. So here are the Valyrian glyphs. And you can see something like this, and it's all flat lines. Flat lines, unless there's a specific curve, right? And then once you start looking at this, it's like you don't just freehand this. You see that the space between these two nodes is 300. Same here, same here, same here, same here. So it's the same exact space in between each of these lines so that they're evenly spaced. This space, by the way, it's 2100 in between this and this, which means that halfway should be, what is that? 1480. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's just how long that is. But it's 430 and 2530. So shouldn't that be? Oh, no, because it's 50, right? It's halfway. So that's why it's 1480 in between those two things. You can also see that this curve right here, it's the exact same dimensions. This line comes out 120, which means that this line over here also comes out 120. And then this one is at an angle of 28.1 degrees. And this one is also at an angle of 28.1 degrees. So it's like, but once you have these things, you can copy and paste them. So for example, I'm going to delete half of this glyph so you can see. All right, so imagine you were here and you wanted to create the other half. Like the first thing that you could do, just drop a node right there and pull it out however long it's going to need to be. Add another node and Now you've got a line. And of course, you can eyeball it, but you don't need to because this thing tells you exactly when it's flat. Then you can grab this. Actually, I better grab the whole thing. Paste it, flip it with one button. Ta-da! There you go. Now you don't even have to worry about if the angles are the same, right? Then you get the whole thing, remove the overlap. Suddenly it's just one thing. And then you can move it and get it closer or further away, depending on what you need. This is basically how all of font construction works. It's just like creating little bitty things. Once it's good, copy and paste and put it in other environments. So that's half of it. Now the other half, definitely don't save, because I changed stuff, is how it actually works. So I wanted to show you with this. By the way, this is a writing system that Jesse and I created for our rabbit language at Langtime Studio. There are these things called open type features. And so I'm going to type an A here. Now, actually, I. There's I. Now, notice what happens when I type a T. It just dynamically changes. And now what it is, it's the syllable block IT, so it's pronounced eat. And it just dynamically changes like that. And in fact, IKH, that went from that went from E to eek to eek, all based on what I typed. The way that works is this. This is essentially a scripting language that says take one or more things over here and turn it into one thing. And so, for example, you can see if you type IK, substitute IK by this glyph, which I just invented, which is IK Ingala, which is the name of the language. And so there you go. But of course, first has to come this one because it runs from top to bottom. So we want first to substitute IKH by IKH Ingala. That way the font will work. So this way, when you're actually typing, it produces a unique character. And this way, you can type an alphabet, but get an abugida or a syllabary or a logography or anything like that. So that's how fonting works in like 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll continue with a question on YouTube. Bulut asks if you could give more detail on how smell and other unusual senses would work in constructed languages. For example, let's say there's a language created for an extraterrestrial species based on electricity and touch. How would you deal with their unusual senses?
Yeah, in that case, you got to really understand the senses. And there's got to be a lot of trial and error. So like for me, I don't know anything about electricity and touch. So like I wouldn't do that. You need to know a lot about it in order to be able to do it. One that I did as an experiment at a conference last year called CopyCon was a language with jelly beans. And the way that worked is there's a California company that makes jelly beans called Jelly Belly that makes very unique flavors. And so what I wanted to try to do was create a language where you could create maximally 5-word sentences that you could distinguish just by taste. But it's a tricky thing. And I'll tell you why, because it didn't really work because it was difficult to tell one flavor from another. And also, and this I didn't account for, once you've had like 2 or 3 jelly beans, it's kind of like the flavor coats your mouth and it makes it difficult to tell other flavors. So like as you eat more jelly beans, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish their flavors. Now, this is a failing of human anatomy. But what that means is like, the language is an experiment. It means if you're going to go back and try it again, you need to do it differently. If you're thinking about how human beings actually work, you probably need to reduce the number of flavors, and you might need to introduce what they do for wine tasting. You know how they like swish it around and then they spit it and then they like get water to wash their mouth out? You might have to do that. Otherwise, your senses become dull as you do it. And so when it comes to anything that uses a separate sense, you have to really understand the beings and how their senses work, because that's going to strongly dictate what you can do in the language. And sometimes it may surprise you. Like when I thought of the idea of the jelly bean language, I thought, well, this will be easy because all these jelly beans have such unique, strong flavors, and so many different ones, and they're discrete. So that will be nice and easy. I did not anticipate that we'd get worse at tasting stuff the more that you ate. So that is what essentially I would recommend. You got to really, really study into that sense perception and let that guide what you can and can't do in the language.
Thank you. I think Göksu can take over from here.
Actually, I'm going to proceed for now with the questions from the chat. But first, does anyone want to raise hands and speak for themselves before I read from the chat? Okay, I guess not. Ayşegül Dilara asks, when creating a conlang, do you or other conlangers follow the language universals that we have for natural languages, or can you go crazy and invent unforeseen grammatical structures?
Language universals are a very difficult thing because what they are doing is they're conjecturing based on observed behavior. And so you shouldn't start from a language universal and go from there, because you have to ask the question why. For example, it's a very trite language universal that I was describing number. There are languages that have singular in plural, singular dual, exactly two in plural, and singular trial in plural, but generally nothing beyond that. You might then come to the conclusion, well, it's impossible. Well, no, that's not true. It's perfectly possible. It's very easy, in fact. Like you could have, I gave an example, you could have a language where there's a singular and plural, but also a special number just for 17, and it means 17 of something. You can always do that, and it's perfectly possible, very easy to create a language that does that. It's just not useful. And that honestly is the answer more than anything else. There are very, very few things that languages can't do. There are just things that aren't very useful, so why would you ever do them? And so then what you do as a language creator is, if you want to do that, well, either you just do it just for fun, or you try to create a reason why it would be useful. Who knows, maybe you're creating a language for some society where the number 17 is just really, really, I don't know, special. And for some reason, people are really good at picking out exactly 17 of something, which we're not good at doing. That's the thing. Human beings, once you get around 5, 6, 7, you can't really just count it very easily. We're really good at counting 1, 2, or 3 of something. But once it gets beyond that, it's like you're just guessing. And that just has to do with how humans work. And so it's nothing very special about language. It's just about the people using it. And so that's really the thing to keep in mind for all those language universals. Otherwise, I just ignore them.
Thank you. And I think Sadar wants to add something.
Hello, at first. Let's say, I try to create a language based on nothing at all. And I try to find my way around some language. And I worked on it for around 2 years when I was a bachelor. And then I tried to compare it with my native tongue, Turkish, English, and a language at some point I know I'm proficient in. I'm not proficient in Polish, but I just know the structure of Polish. That's all. I spent 4.5 months in Poland. That's the source. And in the work, I've done the most similar language in terms of phonological and morphological underlyings were Turkish, in much surprise. That's the first language I created, and I try to create another one right now. The part I'm saying and I'm asking is, yes, we don't focus on language universals when we're creating a language, but language universals would language universals reveal themselves at some point, or they don't? Thank you.
Well, it's interesting. We're Jesse and I are working with a group at a University of North Texas who's doing this analysis of the predictability of words. So if you look at, like if you just take the lexicon of English, for example, and start with the first sound of a word of English, it's very surprising because it could be any number of them. The second letter is less surprising. The third letter gets, maybe a little bit more surprising. And then as you go along, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on letter gets more surprising. In other words, like if you started with and you've gotten mechanica, then like it's not surprising that the rest is ul, because there's very little else it could be. And they were wondering if you could get this pattern in if this pattern would show up in conlangs, and if this shows some great universal truth. And it just seems to be that it's like, well, no. I mean, first of all, yes, you're going to get that pattern, and no, it's not very interesting because you would have to it doesn't have anything to do with humans. Well, a little bit with humans, but it has to do with the fact that the languages that we create are perceived through time. In other words, they start at one place and end at another. Every single language on the planet has that in common, right? And so for that reason, there's always a beginning and always an ending to every single word. And so it would be, you would have to specifically construct a language to do the opposite of that, where it's like the first letter has to be one thing. The second letter could be one of two things. The third letter could be one of three things. The fourth letter could be one of four things, and so on. If you created a language specifically like that, then you'd get the opposite result. But why would anybody do that? Like, it's just not very useful. It's not very interesting. It's also like, it seems very dull, I think, to human beings, where you say, here's my language. Every single word starts with the same sound. It's like, there's no language on the planet that does that, and it's for a reason. And it's nothing very interesting about language. It's not like you have to. It's just that we're human beings that move through time one way. And so we just don't do that. So I think that universals will emerge not because we don't know that we're doing them, but just because it's not very interesting for us to do something different. But if you're aware of it, you absolutely can do something different if you want to. But I mean, honestly, most of those things just don't seem very interesting. And so we just don't do them.
And another question is, how do you decide a language is completed, or if not completed, at which point you decide it is enough?
So a language, a created language, it's a wonderful thing because it's a wonderful thing, I think, for a perfectionist, because it's literally impossible to have a perfect language. And this is true of any. It doesn't matter if it's created or otherwise. Like, think about it this way. Imagine that we're talking about a language like Turkish. Is it complete? Well, no. That would mean that people couldn't make new expressions or new words or anything like that. But is it enough? Sure, absolutely. And so there's absolutely no way to finish a language, ever. And for me, who grew up as a perfectionist, that was something that was very satisfying, because you can create a perfect song, you know? You can go in and say, for like this 4 minutes and 30 seconds, every single note has to be exactly perfect and exactly right. But there's no such thing as that for a language. It defies the very idea of language. Language has to keep growing or it's dead. There's no like complete or not, there's dead or not. That's it. And so for that reason, yeah, there's no such thing as a completed language. There's no such thing as a finished language. However, there are certain kind of benchmarks, I would say, for a language. For example, like my language is big enough that now I have a complete set of nominal inflections and I don't need any more. Now that's done. My language is big enough that I was able to translate like a sentence. That's another benchmark. My language was big enough that I could translate a short text. That's another benchmark. And so that's kind of like the way to look at it. At a certain point, the language is going to be big enough that it's functionally equivalent to a natural language, which doesn't necessarily mean that you can say everything, right? Because there aren't native words for everything in like English. We borrow a lot of words because that's what all languages do. There are also languages like, for example, like the Hawaiian language. When they came into contact with like, you know, English speakers, Portuguese speakers, Chinese speakers, there were tons of things that they didn't have words for because they just hadn't encountered them yet. And so then they borrowed words in or came up with expressions for them. And so there's never a point where you say like the vocabulary is complete, because there's always stuff it can borrow or new concepts that it can come up with. But essentially, it's like you hit these little benchmarks where you say, my language is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it can do more stuff. It can handle more stuff before breaking down. And that's kind of like, I think, the only way to measure it.
Thank you. And Egemen asks, what is the main thing that differs languages that has been constructed over thousands of years for practical purpose and those who has been built like your works, in your opinion?
For practical, like, is the question, what's the difference between natural languages and constructed languages, or between languages like Esperanto, which were created for international communication, and languages like Dothraki that weren't? Natural ones. It's not. The differences aren't very important, to be honest. You know, like. There are language systems that could work. They're not necessarily as large in terms of vocabulary size, and they have a unique origin that you can pinpoint. But that's really the only important difference, I think. Otherwise, I don't know. Like there are so many different types of languages that can be created that it's a difficult question. For example, if you look at a language like Lojban, it's very, very, very different from a natural language. If you instead look at a language like High Valyrian, there are places where I think it'll be different from a natural language. Its vocabulary is not as big, but it is less different from a natural language than Lojban is, and that's by design. You know, if you kind of have to create it to be different. If you don't create it to be different, the differences aren't super important, I think.
Thank you. And Dennis has a question. How did you decide to pursue linguistics while studying literature?
It was just fun, and I had a bunch of free units. I came into university as a sophomore by standing. And I started immediately with my literature major. I didn't have to do elementary, like introductory stuff. And so I just had a lot of free units that I needed to do something with. I took linguistics because it counted as a science class, and I'm not a science person. And then I just really, really liked it. So then with my free units, I just decided to add linguistics as a second major.
And Umut says, I want to work on artificial languages and do more research about them. Do you have any suggestion about from where I can begin to work?
Oh, I don't. I will say that there's more research being done now than there has in the past, which is good. I guess the first thing that you need to do is decide on what type of languages, like what purpose. For example, there's an entire field of linguistics that's been going on for more than 100 years called interlinguistics, and all they do is look at international auxiliary languages. So they only look at things like Esperanto and Edo and Novial, things like that. They don't care about anything else. That has actually a long history. For other languages, that history is much shorter. And so like you kind of need a unique angle. Like for example, the experiment that I talked about, they were trying to examine, is there some sort of difference between created languages and natural languages in terms of the surprisal rate for the lexicon. That's a potential research question. Another one, recently, there was somebody out of MIT who was looking at fMRI and seeing if hearing a created language was different from hearing a natural language, or if the same parts of your brain lit up. In other words, did it think of a created language as a natural language, or did it think of it as like something else? For example, like math or music, which activates different areas of the brain. So that was a research question. I think that's what you need to do. You need to decide, well, what potential research question can I ask? What interests me? And then how do I get, the people that give me funding, how do I get them interested in this question?
Thank you. And Ferhat says, how does arbitrariness in natural languages affect your language creation? As in, what is the approximate ratio of logic and arbitrariness in your conlang languages?
I would hope that it's somewhere in the ballpark. So I create, languages that are intended to be like human languages. And so I hope the level of arbitrariness is about the same. That's what I'm aiming for. Other languages will do things that are very, very different. I described John Wilkins' language at the beginning. And there have been other languages that have attempted to do a similar thing, like Ro. And for there's supposed to be no arbitrariness at all. Every single sound has a meaning. And so nothing is arbitrary aside from the association of the single sound to the single meaning, which is very different from natural languages. Anyway, but I don't concern myself with it as much. I go with it as I'm going to go with it. And then, sometime after I'm dead, maybe somebody can look at my stuff and see if I did a good job or not. FA?
Pelin, I'll continue with two questions from YouTube. First of them, any shout-outs to recent unique conlangs that you believe deserve more attention?
I used to do an award for languages. I did it for about 14 years, called the Smiley Award. Some of my favorites you can see there. Another, I'm a big fan of unique orthographies, and so two that are really interesting to me were Kala by Carl Buck, because his has a really cool kind of glyph shape. It's several glyph shapes, and it really comes across very well. And there's kind of I don't want to call it a logography, but it's somewhat similar. One that does an actual logography is Yuktipot. Is it Tepot or is it, no, it's Yuktipot by oh my gosh, I've forgotten his real name. He's on Tumblr. Well, look up Yuktapad on Tumblr. I'll type it into the chat. Oh, and I spelled it wrong. Yuk. Very sorry. His stuff is really, 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 really good. There are a couple of really fun things that I was able to put up on Fiat Lingua. If you're not aware of Fiat Lingua, I recommend you check that out. Recently, also for you should check out what my wife Jessie has done in the past like half year, because she's done some of the most interesting things I've ever seen with conlanging. One of them is she created it's like almost an 800-page PDF that is a choose your own adventure for creating a language. So it's like you start with one decision and then it goes to another one, and it kind of like models how a language can change. It's extraordinary. And then right now, if you go to her website, quotealinguist.com, she is going through day by day and showing how you can create a language doing a small amount of work each day, just making one small decision each day for the entire year. And she's doing that on her website. So those two things are really, really cool. I recommend.
Thank you. The next question from YouTube is, how important do you think Hatties from Star Wars is to the conlang community?
Not important at all. I mean, it's just gibberish.
And one more question, but I guess that's been already answered. Does being a conlanger pay the bills? How much money do you make, if you feel comfortable about answering that? But I guess that's been answered. So if there's something extra you'd like to share, you can go ahead.
Well, actually, here I'll share something, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but like, you know that in conlanging, the Turkish language is like one of conlangers, at least English-speaking conlangers, favorite languages to learn about, because of its really principled, really orderly vowel harmony system. It's easily the most popular vowel harmony system. And I will say it makes a lot more sense than Finnish, which I'm learning Finnish right now, and it's like, I see what they're doing, but it's just so weird. It's like you have to go from like a to e, and it's like, why? Why are you doing this? How is this saving you any effort? It's just making things more complicated in a weird way. And then, like, my gosh, if you ever want to see a weird vowel harmony system, look up Mongolian. It's been battered by sound changes, and now it doesn't even make sense. It's so weird. But yeah, like Turkish it's like everybody looks at Turkish and like, oh, this is how language should be. It's incredible. But yeah, anyway, I know it's super, super late there. I did want to say thank you so much for staying up with me. I really appreciate it. If you ever had to, if people had to like go to bed, I don't blame you. Oh, it looks like there is one more question. Sede?
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, it was? Oh, I see. You're just sending little hearts. Oh, that's cute. How do you even do that?
I think it's by the sender reaction part, right next to the share the screen.
Oh, I just raised my hand.
On the left side.
Wait a minute. On the left side? Oh my God. Wait. No, that didn't work. All right. Well, I see all the reactions and I appreciate them.
Okay, it was a pleasure for us.
Oh my God, I'm doing it. Oh wow. All right. Well, thank you all so much. It was wonderful to talk to you today, and yeah, I will follow up with some files to send you so that you can hear the stuff.
Oh, that would be great. Göksu, do you have anything you would like to say?
No, I think that was it. And like, thank you so much for like coming here, like giving your time, and we really appreciate everything today. And thank you also for bearing with us with this Google Meets.
That's all right. It's the way the world works now. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you too.
And good afternoon for you, I suppose.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.